Breaking news today, it is official. Have Everton been saved? They have been acquired by the Friedkin Group today, who own Roma, and they have officially acquired a majority stake in Everton Football Club as of today. Today, we are simply asking the question, how does this impact the club? Is this what they've been waiting for all these years? So, Reece, let's kick things straight off. Is this the moment that Everton fans have been waiting for?
Yes, absolutely. It might not be maybe the ownership they probably had in mind. They probably thought maybe, an Arab billionaire was going to come and save them, but instead it's another American owner. I think the league was already owned, half the league was already owned by American owners. So this is another one to that. Dan Friedkin also owns Roma as well. But let's be honest, it's been one of the longest drawn out sagas of an ownership group ever. I mean, I am surprised they weren't snapped up very quickly. Why wouldn't you want to go for them, especially with the new stadium coming? But it looks like it's finally, they've dotted the I's and crossed the T's.
Yeah, well, I think that's what's key, because obviously we've said about Everton, never been relegated, and we've said maybe they are knocking on the door. We've seen the survival scenes, obviously with Lampard as manager, and it does feel like they're hanging on. So maybe there is an argument to say people have been looking at that and going, yeah, don't really want to take over a club who are on the cusp of being relegated, because that could turn a good investment to a pretty bad investment, almost overnight. Now, in terms of the club and where they're at, obviously we know with this particular group, it was almost done months ago. So it was close to actually being done with this group and being taken over. But then there was a few issues, I believe, over loan agreements and basically inspecting the club on a bit of a finer tooth comb. There was a few potential red flags. But thankfully for Everton fans, it now seems that those issues have been, I guess, sorted. And it does look like, by all accounts, obviously there's still approval, FCA and all of that stuff, but it does look like this is going to go ahead. So in terms of, again, you mentioned the owners. Yes, it's not Saudi ownership, but if what I'm reading is correct, Dan Friedkin and himself or the group is worth just shy of £5 billion. So it's not an issue. Money's not going to be an issue.
No, and let's make that clear. They're not short of a few quid, right? Moshiri wasn't short of a few quid either. He isn't. I think we've seen some of the signings he's made at Roma, very expensive, particularly in the wage front. He is willing to invest. We saw Dybala, we've seen Belotti, they've got Ndika there as well. Lukaku only last season as well, where they covered a substantial amount of the wages. So he's willing to invest money, and he's got that money, and he looks like a more sound bet than, no disrespect to them, but the 777 partners, who I think also have a stake in Palace. I know he has Lyon, Seville. Those clubs have been very, very up and down. And with Everton being so volatile as it stands, I think that's kind of the last thing they needed. So at least with Friedkin, Roma have been competing at the top for a long time. He owns less clubs than what they do, so they're probably going to get a bit more attention. Looks like a sound bet. He seems to have his head screwed on. I think he's already injected about £200 million in the club anyway, while the deal goes over, to make sure things are covered as it goes through. And it seems like a good thing for Everton fans. Like I said, I know a lot of times when you get a takeover, you expect probably more, but with the state they've been in, I think they've got to be delighted with this.
Yeah, and they need stability. And to quote the statement from the Friedkin Group, we are focused on securing the necessary approvals to complete the transaction. We look forward to providing stability to the club and sharing our vision for its future. So they want to provide stability. And in football terms, that stability is staying in the Premier League. Now, on top of that, you've also got the new stadium. So I guess we'll talk about Everton's starts of the season in a second, but I guess you could argue this on the flip side, if they can start moving up the table and survive, this could be a great investment. A two-club city, basically, a club with history, a club on the verge of a new stadium, a new era. Could this turn out to be an absolutely fantastic investment for the new owners?
Yeah, of course. I mean, like, at the end of the day, of course, he's got to come out and say all that spill at the start. He's not going to say, I'm going to come in and piss my money up the wall and burn them to the ground, is he? Because that's just not going to work. Moshiri said the same thing. And look, I'll talk about Moshiri in a little while, but Yeah, this is an exciting thing for him. He doesn't have to fight for fans because Everton are a very well supported club, hugely successful club, particularly when we look at what they did in the 80s. Like I said, new stadium just over the corner, so that's going to bring in more money for the club, and they're going to open up as well to the US fan base. They're going to attract a whole legion of fans there, so they should be excited for this if they get the marketing right in particular. So there's a lot there to look forward to, and yes, there's work that needs to be put into it now because they've had an absolute dire start, but there's something to now clutch onto, which is what should give them the boost. We saw it with Newcastle when they were taken over a couple of years back, what a boost that gave them. So yeah, it's looking good.
Yeah, and I guess the question I'm kind of asking is, and Everton fans will be asking, is assuming this goes ahead, which again it looks fairly likely it will. Day to day, and maybe not in the next few weeks, but day to day in the next transfer window, do we see this actually tangibly changing anything for Everton fans, or is it going to be? Look, maybe Newcastle fans will debate this, and some will say it's been a success, some will say it hasn't. Do we think we're going to see an instant impact in the transfer window, or is this likely to be drawn out and maybe a little bit slow and steady? What do we think?
I think it's going to be what depends where they are in January. I don't see them blowing, spending big like the Newcastle owners did, because that's a different type of ownership. I think they're going to see where they are, but they've got a lot to get rid of more first before they can bring in. And it'll be who's available on the market. I know, like I said, they'll have money to spend, so I'm sure that they'll look to invest it, and they'll probably will invest it better, because the money spent on players since 2017 has been poor, very, very poor. I don't see it, other than probably Braithwaite at this moment in time, which of those players are going to go for a substantial profit. Who needs a goalkeeper at the moment that's going to pay the big money for Pickford? Who's going to go for Calvert-Lewin with his injury issues, or pay big in that case? So they've got a lot to get rid of first before they can bring in. So they're going to have to judge it how it goes in January. And I think by then they should have clawed themselves back some ground.
Yeah, I think for me as well, it's the obviously the points deduction we've already seen, the sort of threat of points deductions for other teams. I do think, although Everton fans will rightly be buzzing and ecstatic, I do think we may see a bit of a slow bleed with the funds being rolled out, similar to Newcastle, because as you said, they can't come in because of all these loopholes being closed and what have you. They're not going to come in and start whacking £200 million on a window. But I guess ultimately for Everton fans, how you look at it, it is a new era. It maybe players and managers don't care, but it may give them a renewed sense of confidence. Because if you look at the start of their season, I mean, they're in 19th place. Now, I'm pretty sure this is a stat, but maybe don't quote me, or Everton fans correct me if I'm wrong. But before the game week just gone, I believe you had the worst start to the season, I think in the top 9 tiers of English football, which, if true, is absolutely horrific. And it does give you a bit of a scale of how big the job is on the owner's hands, either way. So I think this will give Everton fans and players hopefully a renewed sense of confidence. But the reality is, regardless of ownership, if they don't improve on the pitch right now, imagine the owners take over and you get relegated. It'd be a disaster. And at the minute, the way the season started, Everton are in a relegation battle. You have to be honest about that.
I think where it stands, though, I think if we look at the Birmingham ownership, relegation is probably is a good thing. It gives you a chance to reset, refresh. You can shift out a load of the deadwood that you don't need. And if you look at a lot of that squad, a lot of that squad will go, and they'll probably go for free. So it's not the worst thing in the world.
It's just so hard to come back, though. It's just so hard.
Players will drop down to play for Everton. I'll give them that. And they'll attract a lot more players than a lot of teams would. The issue that is obviously the stadium. You can't be opening up. They'd sell it out in the first game, of course, but clawing that back is the biggest. The financial hit they'd have with the parachute payments for that year would be tough. I just think there's a lot to be positive. You're right. The start has been a shambles. It's been a shambles. To have 2 consecutive games, 2-0 leads and blow them. 4-0 away to Spurs as well. Didn't win the first game of the season either, which wasn't good enough against Brighton. And they've obviously got a draw at the weekend, so they've got something. But in it's just not been good. And the cloud from the takeover issue has been lingering over that for some time. They're going to have to exploit. They're going to have to exploit the free agent market, I think, at the moment, which is what they did at Roma. So,
yeah, and I think that there is a debate and a wider question to the whole takeover in general, which is more relevant to obviously other fans and well, any fans of the Premier League. How does this takeover impact the league? Because Reece, you've been, you talked about it for a while with this ever increasing American ownership. We're starting to see, you could argue, the move to a Super League and the Champions League, a different format. Is the Americanization of football, does this further enhance the Americanization of the Premier League? And is that an issue?
The issue is not. Look, I'm a big advocate for Americanization in the sport. I think if we look at American sports, it's more competitive. I know that we'd criticize about that they don't have relegation and teams will flunk a season because they get the best draft pick. But it brings them back up again. What's the point really of supporting Crystal Palace when you're just going to sell your best player? Eventually you're going to run out of players to replace them with. You're never going to compete. You're never going to win trophies in this current model. So you have more Americans in the game. It will even it out. If we look at it now, how the league's going, there's been more swappings of players or more buying different types of players, not necessarily teams just buying from their competitors like they do in Germany. So I think it's a good thing for the league. The teams around the relegation zone would be a bit cheesed off that Everton have got this ownership because they're going to think, oh no, like they're going to spring back now, and that means there's now a spot free, so we could be going down. But it's a good thing. It's a good thing for Everton. It's a good thing for the league. People don't want to hear it, but we need more American owners in the game to make the league fairer. I don't care. It's true. The league is not fair as it is. There's literally no point supporting a team outside the top six, and realistically, there's no point supporting a team that's not Man City at this moment in time. So it is what it is. It will change, and the marketing we've seen from the American ownerships have been phenomenal. Wrexham are a prime example of that. They sold out with Birmingham last week. Ridiculous. So it works.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think you want a situation where the whole league is owned by one set of a group or a type of investor, because you get, as you said, you might not just get a hostile takeover of a club, you might get a hostile takeover of the whole league as we know it. Which, again, yes, I know the Premier League is different from the Champions League, but the Champions League feels like a perfect example of that. Where does it need to change? Not really. A club's, I don't know, are clubs that happy about it changing?
It's a conversation for another day. But the Champions League, again, unless you're a Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, there's no point being in it other than for the money. Borussia Dortmund got to the final, they're never going to win it. Inter got to the final, never going to win it. There's no point. So we can discuss this for another day. But the league needs to be more competitive, and I think the American ownership is going to get to that model. Look, it's no real shock the three teams that came up last season went straight back down. So Everton stabilising is a good thing. The ownership looks positive. They won the Conference League with Roma 2021. Competed quite regularly, had Mourinho. I think probably should have done a little bit better than what they have been doing. Obviously, been hard with players at the moment. They're much more under constraints than what Everton will be, sharing a stadium and, trying to compete in other aspects like that. I think they should be doing better. That's the one sticking point I've got with the ownership. But nevertheless, Everton finished 17th now is much better than where they currently are. So,
well, yeah, that was the question I was going to ask to wrap it up. Do you think with this takeover, whether it impacts football on the pitch or not, given the rough start, do you think this can spur Everton on to survive? Do you think they'll go down, or do you think they can actually thrive and start getting, mid-table like many people predicted?
They were going to stay up anyway. Look, they were going to stay up anyway. I think the start's not been good, but it takes time sometimes and a little bit of a steady ship. Whether Sean Dyche will be the one to lead that is a different argument. They've got the players there. They've got the fan base to do it. The players put in some shocking performances and let the fans down, but those fans have shown that when they're on your side, they can do it. It's going to might take another couple of weeks to get a win yet, but they'll be fine.
Yeah, I agree. I think either way, regardless of the takeover, they've got the quality in that squad to survive. They've got the right managers to survive. So, Everton fans, we're saying you're going to be all right. But we've had our say. We want to hear from you. one, are you absolutely buzzing about this takeover? Two, surely you're going to start now, right? And three, as always, make sure you're actually subscribed and following the channel. But that's all we got time for today. As always, like, comment, and subscribe. You know the drill.
Here we go.